In the shadowy corners of our justice system, a new method of execution is stirring intense debate across America. Today, we dive deep into Alabama's controversial nitrogen gas executions, where a recent court decision has set the stage for the nation's third such execution. What does it mean when a state pioneers a new way to carry out capital punishment? And more importantly, what happens when the constitutional lines between justice and cruelty become blurred? I'm Sean Dupree, and this is The Real Crime Diary, Daily Dose of Crime, where we examine the cases that challenge our understanding of justice and humanity. Today's story takes us into the heart of a legal battle that could reshape the future of capital punishment in America. Nitrogen hypoxia execution represents a significant departure from traditional methods of capital punishment, marking what some call a new chapter in America's ongoing debate about humane executions. The process itself sounds deceptively simple. The condemned inmate wears a respirator-style mask that replaces breathable air with pure nitrogen gas, theoretically leading to death through oxygen deprivation. Proponents of this method claim it causes a quick, peaceful death, comparing it to the experience of airline passengers who lose consciousness when cabin pressure drops at high altitudes. They argue that the lack of oxygen leads to swift unconsciousness, followed by death, without the complications often associated with lethal injection or other execution methods. Yet, as we've seen in the first two nitrogen executions in our nation's history, the reality may be more complex. The controversy stems from fundamental questions about what actually happens during these executions. While state officials maintain the process is humane and efficient, critics point to witness accounts describing concerning physical responses that have raised serious questions about the method's reliability and humaneness. As Alabama prepares for its third nitrogen execution, these debates have only intensified, forcing us to confront difficult questions about what constitutes a constitutional method of execution in modern America. In a landmark decision that could shape the future of capital punishment in America, U.S. District Judge R. Austin Huffaker Jr. has denied a preliminary injunction that would have blocked Alabama's third nitrogen gas execution. The ruling hinges on a critical legal standard: the burden of proof needed to show that a method of execution violates constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. At the heart of Judge Huffaker's decision lies a stark assessment of the evidence presented. The court found that the arguments against nitrogen hypoxia amounted to what he termed speculation and a parade of highly unlikely events. The defense team, led by the Federal Defenders Program, had argued that the method posed unacceptable risks of pain and suffering, but failed to convince the court that these risks rose to the level of constitutional concern. The legal battle intensified during a hearing where Alabama corrections officials testified about their first-hand observations of previous nitrogen executions. While the defense introduced media accounts describing disturbing physical responses in past executions, Judge Huffaker noted significant inconsistencies in witness testimonies. Ultimately, he concluded that the evidence showed the protocol achieved its intended purpose, causing unconsciousness and death within 10 minutes. What makes this ruling particularly significant is its potential to set a precedent for future challenges to nitrogen hypoxia executions. The judge's emphasis on requiring concrete evidence rather than theoretical concerns could raise the bar for inmates seeking to challenge this method on constitutional grounds. Despite the defense team's immediate announcement of their plans to appeal, this decision marks a crucial moment in the ongoing legal debate over what constitutes acceptable methods of execution in our justice system. The controversy surrounding nitrogen hypoxia executions reached a fever pitch earlier this year when Kenneth Smith became the first person in the United States to be executed using this method. What witnesses observed during that January execution, and the subsequent execution of Alan Miller last month, has become a critical point of debate in determining the method's constitutionality. Media witnesses, including reporters from the Associated Press, documented unsettling details from both executions. They described how both Smith and Miller experienced violent shaking on the gurney that lasted for 2 minutes or longer. After these initial movements subsided, witnesses noted several minutes of labored breathing, marked by long, concerning pauses between breaths. But here's where the testimony becomes complicated. When Alabama corrections officials took the stand to describe what they observed, their accounts painted a markedly different picture. The stark contrast between these official accounts and media witness descriptions has raised serious questions about the reliability of observational evidence in these cases. What exactly transpired in those execution chambers? And why do the accounts vary so dramatically? The duration of consciousness has become another point of heated debate. While state officials maintain that unconsciousness occurs rapidly, followed by a quick progression to death, media witnesses described concerning physical responses that seem to indicate otherwise. These discrepancies have left many wondering about the true nature of death by nitrogen hypoxia. Perhaps most troubling is the difficulty in reconciling these conflicting accounts. Judge Huffaker acknowledged this challenge in his ruling, noting that the evidence concerning what actually occurred during these executions was both conflicting and inconsistent. Yet he ultimately focused on what he considered the bottom line, that death occurred within 10 minutes, with unconsciousness happening even sooner. But does the speed of death alone address the constitutional questions about potential suffering during those critical minutes? To understand the gravity of the case before us, we need to turn back the clock to 1994, when 37-year-old Vicky DeBlue was simply trying to make her way home. She was hitchhiking from Tennessee to Louisiana, where her mother lived, when she encountered a group of teenagers who offered her what seemed like a harmless ride. This simple act of trust would tragically become her final decision. The group of 4 teenagers, including Kerry Grayson, who was 19 at the time, diverted from any planned route and instead drove DeBlue to a secluded wooded area. What happened next defies any sense of human decency. In an act of senseless violence, they attacked her and, in a horrifying turn of events, threw her body off a cliff. But the violence didn't end there. They returned to mutilate her body, adding another layer of brutality to an already heinous crime. The investigation would reveal that this wasn't a crime of opportunity gone wrong, but rather a deliberate series of choices made by these young perpetrators. While all 4 teenagers were initially sentenced to death for their roles in the murder, the legal landscape would shift dramatically in the years following their convictions. 2 of the defendants had their death sentences overturned when the Supreme Court ruled against executing offenders who were under 18 at the time of their crimes. Grayson's case stands apart from his co-defendants. At 19, he was the oldest of the group, and today, he remains the only one still facing capital punishment. The brutality of the crime, combined with his age at the time, placed him in a unique legal position. Old enough to face the death penalty, yet young enough to spark debates about the role of youth in criminal responsibility. The details of this case continue to haunt Jefferson County, where the murder took place. It serves as a stark reminder of how a simple offer of help can turn deadly, and how a moment of vulnerability can lead to unimaginable consequences. What drives young people to commit such horrific acts? And how do we, as a society, respond when confronted with crimes that seem to defy all rational explanation? The case of Kerry Grayson isn't just about one execution or one method. It's a mirror reflecting the evolving face of capital punishment in America. As states grapple with challenges securing traditional lethal injection drugs, we're witnessing a pivot toward alternative methods that would have seemed unthinkable just a decade ago. Nitrogen hypoxia, the electric chair, firing squads. These aren't relics of the past anymore, but active options in our present-day justice system. Consider this. Alabama, like many states, still lists lethal injection as its primary execution method. Yet here we are discussing nitrogen gas chambers in 2024. This shift didn't happen in a vacuum. It's the result of pharmaceutical companies increasingly refusing to supply execution drugs, forcing states to either halt executions entirely or seek alternative methods. But at what point do these alternatives cross a line? When does the search for a new execution method become an exercise in experimental justice? The debate extends far beyond the mechanics of how we carry out executions. It forces us to confront fundamental questions about the nature of justice, redemption, and what constitutes cruel and unusual punishment in modern society. When Judge Huffaker ruled on Grayson's case, he wasn't just deciding on the legality of nitrogen hypoxia, he was adding another chapter to America's complex relationship with capital punishment. As more states consider adopting nitrogen hypoxia, we're setting precedents that will echo through future cases. The success or failure of these executions, the testimony of witnesses, the legal challenges, they're all creating a framework that will influence how we approach capital punishment for years to come. And with each new method we introduce, we reopen the debate about whether we're truly achieving justice or simply finding new ways to end a life. As we reach the end of today's episode, we're left with some haunting questions about the future of executions in America. What does it say about our society that we're constantly searching for new ways to carry out capital punishment? And at what point do these innovations cross an ethical line? The case of Kerry Grayson may be proceeding toward its conclusion, but it opens the door to countless other questions. Will nitrogen hypoxia become the new standard for executions across the country? Are we moving forward in our pursuit of justice, or are we simply finding more clinical ways to end a life? And perhaps most importantly, how will future generations judge our choices? Think about this. Every time we introduce a new execution method, we're not just making a practical decision, we're making a moral one. We're defining as a society what we consider acceptable in the pursuit of justice. Is there truly such a thing as a humane execution? Or are we simply trying to make ourselves feel better about a fundamentally challenging aspect of our justice system? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Where do you stand on the evolution of execution methods? Should we continue seeking new alternatives? Or is it time to re-examine the entire system? Share your perspectives in the comments, and join us tomorrow for another deep dive into the complex world of criminal justice. Until then, I'm Sean Dupree, and this has been The Real Crime Diary. Hey listeners, welcome back to The Real Crime Diary. I'm your host, Sean Dupree. If you tuned in last time, we had a deep dive into the disturbing history of power abuse across different eras, looking at the connection between dominance, control, and how it plays out even today. We touched on scandals from the past and compared them with some modern-day examples, showing how these patterns of abuse, unfortunately, persist. One of the most insightful tools we've explored to understand this is my book, Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's not just a historical account, but an interdisciplinary approach to understanding why this keeps happening. We draw from history, philosophy, and modern case studies to explain how figures like Dominique Pellico, Harvey Weinstein, and others have exploited their positions of power for their own gain, often protected by the very systems meant to stop them. Recap of last interaction. In our last live stream, we discussed how libertinism, philosophically introduced by figures like Marquis de Sade, has shaped the way power and pleasure have been entangled throughout history. This concept ties directly into how figures like Weinstein operated, as we saw parallels between de Sade's fictional characters and the way powerful men manipulated their victims in real life. You guys had some amazing comments, asking how societal structures have allowed these behaviors to go unchecked for so long. It's a crucial question, and one that the book addresses deeply. Why this book is valuable. Now, what's powerful about Power, Pleasure, and Pain is its ability to break down these historical patterns and link them to the present. You're not just reading about ancient Rome or Enlightenment philosophy, you're seeing how these ideologies are alive today. The book uncovers how sexual violence and control have been systematically woven into the fabric of societies from ancient times right up to the modern era. It's about understanding not just the individual predators, but the systems that protect them. Whether it's in royal courts, religious institutions, or today's corporate and entertainment worlds. Through these historical lenses, we also explore movements like #MeToo that are beginning to dismantle these structures. The fight for justice is far from over, but as the book demonstrates, we are in the midst of a cultural shift where legal reforms are finally addressing these long-standing issues. It's more than a history lesson. It's a guide to understanding and supporting change today. What's next? If you want to dive deeper, I suggest picking up Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's available now, and trust me, it will change the way you think about power, pleasure, and control. We've even got some exclusive content coming up on the channel where we'll be exploring the book's case studies in even more detail, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to The Real Crime Diary so you don't miss any updates. Let's keep this conversation going, because understanding the past is key to changing the future.